The scent of wisteria was a lie. It was beautiful, sweet and thick in the grand hall, but it was a mask. It tried to cover the sharp tang of ambition, the sour note of jealousy that I knew so well. I pulled the hood of my cloak lower, my fingers trembling against the rough wool. I made myself small in the alcove, a stain of shadow against the gleaming stone wall. 100 candles danced, their light catching on jewels and flawless smiles. They were all so beautiful. My sisters shone at the heart of the room like fallen stars. Their laughter was a weapon, sharp and clear, cutting through the murmurs of the hopeful and the proud. Tonight was the choosing. The Alpha King would pick his queen from the daughters of the 5 Pacts. My sisters had dreamed of this, plotted for this since we were children. I touched the wooden pendant at my throat, my mother's last gift, the only piece of her I had. Its surface was worn smooth in one spot from a lifetime of anxious touch. My father said she whispered something to me before she died, bringing me into this world. He said she told him to tell me one day that true beauty reflects the soul, not the skin. For 13 years, those words were the only rope holding me to sanity. The curse. My skin prickled just thinking the word. I had been beautiful once. I have the faintest memory of it, like a dream of sunlight. Hair like pale moonlight, eyes like a summer sky, or so the old nurse said. But beauty is a dangerous gift in a nest of vipers. My eldest sister, Celine, told me that herself. Just this morning, as she fastened rubies at her throat, she had looked at my covered face and hissed, "Stay hidden, Elara. Your face would send the Alpha King running to the mountains. It's humiliation enough that you share our blood." Leora, the second, had giggled, a sound like breaking glass. Perhaps we should present her as a cautionary tale. This is what happens to girls who forget their place. She had traced a perfect finger down her own perfect cheek, mirroring the scars I believed cut across my own. I shifted in the shadows, the memory a physical ache. The enchantment they cast on me when I was 12 was an act of pure malice, a spell of illusion that made me see a monster in every mirror, while the world saw only a plain, forgettable girl. For years, I believed the lie was truth. I believed the ugliness was bone deep. Then, during a fever, our old healer, Agnes, had pressed a cool cloth to my brow and whispered a secret that cracked my world. The only real magic, child, is what they've planted in your mind. The mirror lies. But knowing didn't break the curse. Seeing was believing, and I still saw the horror. So I lived in the shadows by choice, hiding from eyes that might not see my scars, but would surely see my shame. The drums began, a deep primal beat that vibrated through the soles of my feet and up into my teeth. I pressed back against the cold stone as if I could melt into it. The great doors at the end of the hall swung open. The crowd parted like wheat before a scythe. King Kaelen Blackwood entered. Even from across the vast room, his presence was a physical force. He moved with the lethal grace of the wolf he was, shoulders broad beneath a cloak of midnight fur. His hair was the color of wet bark, brushing a jawline cut from granite. But it was his eyes. Even from here, I could see they glowed with a faint amber light. Wolf sight in human form, the alpha of alphas, unmatched, unmated, a king of ice and stone. He looked lonely. The thought came unbidden, whispering through my fear. A serving girl had sidled into my alcove, her own eyes wide. "Cold as a winter peak, ain't he?" she muttered. She wasn't wrong. Werewolves ran hot, alphas like furnaces. Yet, as his gaze swept over the assembled daughters, there was a frost in his expression, an isolation that echoed my own. I knew that feeling. I wore it like a second skin. Tonight, I choose a queen, to stand beside me, to unite our territories, to secure our future. My sisters preened. Celine tilted her chin, the picture of regal grace. Leora offered a smile that was all predator. The The twins, Celeste and Aurora, mirrored each other's pose of delicate submission. Even little Flora, who had sometimes shown me scraps of kindness, straightened with a hope that made my heart ache. My father stood behind them, chest puffed with pride. His eyes never once flickered to the shadows where I hid. I was the secret shame, the ghost daughter, useful only for tending the forgotten gardens, while my sisters were groomed for glory. The ceremony dragged on. Each eligible daughter presented, bowed, offered a symbolic gift. My sisters of the prestigious House Frostweaver had prime positions. Celine presented a dagger of star-forged steel. "I bring the strength and ancient wisdom of the Northern Reach, Your Majesty." Her voice was a trained instrument. King Kaelen accepted it, performed the ritual cut on his palm, but his amber eyes looked through her as if she were made of glass. A fragile, foolish hope wilted inside me. Soon the formalities would end, the feast would begin. In the noise and merriment I could slip away, back to my tiny room in the East Tower, back to my books and my solitude, back to being no one. The last daughter from the final pack returned to her place. A sigh of relief trembled on my lips. King Kaelen did not sit. He remained standing, his gaze sweeping the hall once more, slower this time. His nostrils flared. My blood turned to ice. "I sense another," he said, his voice slicing the silence. No, it wasn't possible. He couldn't mean me. I was air. I was nothing. I pressed back until the stones scraped my spine through my cloak. He was scenting the air, tracking something, and with a horror that drained all warmth from my body, I knew it was me. Through the perfume and the sweat and the candle smoke, he had found my scent. There, his arm rose, one finger pointing unerringly to my dark alcove. The world tilted, 100 heads turned as one, a wave of attention crashed over me, crushing, suffocating. I saw my father's stunned face, saw the murderous rage blossom on Celine's perfect features. "Come forward." It wasn't an alpha command, but the authority in those 2 words was a hook in my soul. My legs moved numb and clumsy, carrying me out of the shadows and into the blazing, merciless light. I clutched my hood, my knuckles white. If I showed my face, the humiliation would break my father. It would shatter whatever fragile standing our house had. Despite everything, I couldn't do that to him. King Kaelen was before me. He had moved without a sound. He towered over me, an immovable mountain. "Your hood," he said, his voice quieter now, but no less absolute. "Remove it." "Please," I whispered, the word tearing from a dry throat. I wasn't presented because I'm not eligible. I'm cursed, Your Majesty." Something sparked in those amber depths, not disgust, curiosity. "Show me this curse." A laugh high and brittle as icicles shattered the moment. Leora glided forward, a vision of concerned grace. "Forgive our poor sister, Your Majesty. Elara is unwell. She believes herself monstrous, a delusion we have humored to spare her feelings." She smiled. "It's a kindness." "She is simple," Celine added smoothly, joining her. "Touched in the head since childhood. We protect her." I flinched at the old, practiced lie, but the king wasn't looking at them. He was looking at me, through me. "I didn't ask for their explanation," he said, his voice dropping to a rumble only I could hear. "I asked you." His hand lifted towards my hood. I stumbled back. "You don't understand. What I see, what they made me see." He went very still. "What they made you see," he repeated. The air around us grew colder. "Explain." But Celine was there, her hand closing like a vice on my arm. "Your Majesty, please, let us remove her. She'll only distress herself further." The growl that came from King Kaelen's chest shook the crystal in the chandeliers. It was a sound of pure primal warning. "Remove your hand from her or lose it." Celine paled, but her fingers dug deeper, and I felt it, a subtle, sickening pulse of magic, a reminder, a threat. "The girl stays," and this time alpha power flooded the words, a wave of pressure that made every wolf in the room bow their heads a fraction. "Everyone else will withdraw, now." Protest died unspoken, the hall emptied, a river of silk and disgruntlement flowing through the side doors. My sisters were the last to leave. Celine's eyes promised me a world of pain. Leora's smile was a silent scream. Then the great doors boomed shut, and we were alone in the vast candle-lit silence. "Now," King Kaelen said, and his voice was different, softer, yet somehow more intense. "Show me what you've been hiding." Terror and a wild, impossible hope warred in my chest. This was it, the moment of truth. Whatever he saw would decide everything. I raised shaking hands to my hood, my eyes squeezed shut. The royal estate wasn't a castle. It was a mountain that had decided to become one. Black stone walls rose from the cliff face as if grown from the living rock, jagged and proud against the endless sky. From the window of my new chambers, rooms larger than my entire tower back home, I could see the world. The 5 territories unfurled below like a rumpled tapestry of forest, river, and meadow, shrouded in morning mist. 3 days. 3 days since the choosing that shattered my life. 3 days of silent servants, overwhelming luxury, and the constant, terrifying presence of the king. King Kaelen, my betrothed. The words still felt like a lie. I turned from the dizzying view to face the one thing in the room that frightened me more, the full-length mirror framed in silvered oak. My reflection stared back, a stranger wearing my mother's pendant. Moonlight hair, winter sky eyes, skin smooth and clear, no scars, no twists, just a face, a young woman's face, pale with anxiety but undeniably whole, undeniably pretty. My fingers rose, tracing the unmarked skin of my cheek. I still expected to feel the ragged ridges, the ugly furrows. The disconnect between what I saw and what my memory screamed was true made my head spin. 13 years of believing a lie leaves a wound that doesn't heal just because the bandage is ripped off. You still don't believe it, do you? I startled, whirling to find Kaelen leaning in the doorway. He wore simple black today, a warrior's clothes, and he looked more approachable, more real than in his ceremonial finery. Yet the power in him was a constant hum in the air, like the silence before thunder. 13 years is a long time to live in a nightmare, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Waking up doesn't make the fear of the dream go away. He crossed the room, stopping a respectful distance away. He always kept that space between us, a careful gap I was both grateful for and, confusingly, regretted. Your sisters arrived this morning. Ice water flooded my veins. So soon? The formal presentation of my chosen queen to the Council of Alphas requires a representative from each ruling bloodline. As daughters of the Northern Alpha, they must attend. His jaw tightened. I could bar them, find a reason, say the word. I wanted to. Oh, how I wanted to. The thought of facing Celine and Leora again, here in this fragile new world, made my hands shake. But hiding from them, that's what the Shadow Girl would do, the girl they made. I squared my shoulders, meeting his gaze. No, if I hide from them now, I let them win. I stay the frightened creature they created. Something warm flickered in his amber eyes. Approval. Respect. It warmed a cold place inside me I hadn't known was frozen. As you wish, but they are warned. Any insult to you, any hint of magic within these walls will be treated as treason. He paused. Your father sends his regrets. A sudden illness prevents his travel. His tone said he didn't believe the excuse, but he sent this. Kaelen held out a small velvet pouch. I took it with numb fingers, loosening the drawstring. A delicate silver ring tumbled into my palm, set with a single cloud-white moonstone. my mother's wedding band. A folded note accompanied it in my father's elegant script. She would have wanted you to have this. I should have given it long ago. Forgive an old fool who saw too late. Tears, hot and sudden, pricked behind my eyes. It was too little, it was years too late, but it was not nothing. It was an acknowledgement, a crack in the wall of his neglect. "Will you tell me about her?" Kaelen asked quietly. "Your mother." The question surprised me. "I never knew her. She died bringing me into the world. Yet you wear her memory." He gestured to the pendant at my throat. "Stories," I said softly. "From the old servants. She was kind," they said, "quietly strong. She loved books and growing things." A faint, real smile touched my lips. "There's a garden in the east courtyard at home. She planted it. I tended it after she was gone. It was the one place that felt like mine. My sisters thought it was common, too much dirt, too much patience required." He nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something. "You have her hands," he said, "long-fingered, made for creating beauty, not destroying it." I looked down at my hands, calloused from garden soil, now clean and pale. "How could you know that?" "Portraits, house records. I made it my business to know the histories of all 5 ruling families." A faint, almost shy smile touched his lips. "I am thorough." A knock at the door shattered the moment. The king's steward, a severe man named Gareth, bowed. "The council gathers, Your Majesty, and the representatives from House Frostweaver have arrived." Kaelen's face smoothed into the unreadable mask of the Alpha King. "Very well, tell them the proceedings begin at midday, and double the guard on Lady Elara's chambers." "Already done, sire." When we were alone again, Kaelen turned to me. "You don't have to attend the initial session. It's posturing and politics." I thought of Celine's smirk, Leora's cruel laughter. They would be expecting a cowering mouse. "I'll attend," I said, my voice firm. Better to face the rumors head-on than hide and let them grow. He studied me, that penetrating gaze that seemed to see past skin and bone. "You are braver than you know, Elara Frostweaver." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Wear something significant." After he was gone, I stood in the center of the room, the silence pressing in. The wardrobe was filled with gowns fit for a queen, silks, velvets, jewels, garments meant to announce power and status. Celine and Leora would be armored in such things, weapons of thread and gemstone. I would not try to outshine them. I would not try to be them. My fingers brushed past the brilliant reds and golds, settling on a gown of deep midnight blue, the color of the sky during the sacred full moon. It was simply cut, but the fabric was rich, and subtle silver embroidery traced the hem and sleeves, like distant stars. It felt like me, or like the me I wanted to be. I fastened my mother's moonstone ring on a slender chain beside her wooden pendant. Then I faced the mirror one last time. The woman who looked back held her chin high. Her eyes, though still shadowed with fear, were clear. She looked like she could belong here. Not a queen yet, but perhaps someone who could learn. The council chamber was a cavern of power, a massive table of ancient oak carved with the symbols of the 5 pacts. Around it sat 12 alphas, 2 from each territory, their combined presence a pressure against my skin. And there, seated among the northern representatives, were Celine and Leora. They were breathtaking, Celine in crimson silk, Leora in emerald velvet. They were polished jewels, sharp and perfect. They watched me approach, their expressions masks of polite concern that didn't reach their cold, hate-filled eyes. Kaelen rose as I entered, and the entire council followed suit. The gesture of respect was not lost on my sisters. Celine's perfect smile tightened. My lords and ladies, Kaelen's voice filled the space effortlessly. May I present Lady Elara Frostweaver, my chosen mate and your future queen. I executed the formal curtsy I'd practiced, my heart hammering against my ribs. The council acknowledges the king's choice, intoned an older alpha with a beard like a storm cloud, Victor Grimshaw of the Eastern Ridge. His eyes, like chips of flint, assessed me. As is tradition, we will hear testimony from her bloodline representatives, Ladies Selene Frostweaver and Leora Frostweaver. You stand for your father, Alpha Ronan. What say you of your sister's fitness to rule? Selene rose, a vision of regal sorrow. Every eye followed her. Honorable council, she began, her voice a melody of false pain. We come before you with heavy hearts and grave concerns. Her sister beside her dabbed a non-existent tear, the picture of distressed devotion. Our sister Elara has lived a sheltered life, she continued, her gaze sweeping the table. Necessarily so. Her delicate constitution, her fragile nerves, they have kept her from the rigorous training in statecraft, diplomacy, and sacred tradition that a queen requires. She turned those sorrowful eyes on me. We love her dearly, but we fear the burden of a crown would shatter her gentle spirit. Murmurs rippled around the table. I kept my face still, marveling at the artistry of the lie. It was all truth, twisted. I was sheltered by their design. I lacked training by their decree. Leora stood up, joining her sister in a show of solidarity. There is also the matter of her stability, the unfortunate delusions about her appearance, which the gracious... The world snapped back into focus, but the dread from the vision clung to me like a second skin. Kaelen's study, with its shelves of ancient books and maps of the territories, felt suddenly too small, the air too thick. The Moon Shadow Blade, I whispered, the name itself tasting of cold iron and older magic. They mean to use it at the ceremony, to sever the bond before it can even form. Kaelen's face was a mask of controlled fury. He moved to the door, barking orders to guards I couldn't see. Double the patrols on the western forest border. Send a tracking party to the lightning-struck oak. Start there. He turned back to me, his intensity a palpable force. Describe the cave again, every detail. I closed my eyes, trying to recapture the fragments. It was deep, damp. The floor was uneven stone. There was a natural pillar, like a stalagmite near the back. The symbols Selene drew, they were spiral, with hooks like thorns at the edges. The blood was dark, fresh. I shuddered. The words, "Veil of truth torn away, bring back night to shroud the day." A reversal ritual, Kaelen murmured, striding to a shelf and pulling down a heavy, leather-bound tome. Not just to recast the illusion, but to actively undo any truth that has been revealed, to make the world see you as they wish you to be seen. He slammed the book open on his desk, pages fluttering. And the blade would be the final blow, cutting the tether of fate so it could never be repaired. The clinical description of their malice was worse than any outburst. How can I see these things? I asked, my voice trembling. Seers, they're myths, legends from before the Great Division. Gifts sleep in bloodlines, he said, not looking up from the ancient text. Sometimes for generations, they can be awakened by trauma, by exposure to great magic. His eyes flicked to me. Or by being the focus of a sustained malicious enchantment for over a decade, your mind was forced to perceive a false reality. Perhaps in fighting to see the truth, it opened a new channel. A weapon forged from my own pain. The irony was bitter. I don't want it. I can't control it. We may not have a choice, he said grimly. If they've masked their presence with blood magic, my trackers won't find them by scent or trail. But you saw them. You might be the only one who can. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on me. It was like falling into a dream. I don't know how to do it on purpose. He finally looked up from the book, his gaze softening a fraction. Then we must try to guide you, but not here. He offered me his hand. There is a place, a quiet place. I placed my hand in his fingers closed around mine, warm and solid, an anchor in the swirling chaos. He led me not to the grand halls or the fortified towers, but to a secluded part of the castle, down a spiraling stone staircase that smelled of damp earth and old peace. At the bottom was a simple oak door. He pushed it open. The room beyond took my breath away. It was circular, hewn from the living rock of the mountain. The ceiling was a natural dome, and at its zenith a precise shaft was cut, open to the sky above. A single beam of afternoon sunlight, thick with dancing dust motes, speared down to illuminate the center of the room, where the stone floor was worn smooth in a perfect circle. Symbols, older than any in the castle above, were carved into the walls, phases of the moon, running wolves, staring eyes. "The communion chamber," Kaelen said, his voice reverent. "Built by the first Alpha King, it amplifies our connection to the moon, even when she is hidden. It is a place of truth." I stepped inside, the air cool and still. A profound silence resided here, a silence that felt listening. "What do I do?" "Sit in the light," he instructed, joining me in the sunbeam. We sat cross-legged facing each other, knees almost touching. "Close your eyes, breathe, find your wolf." I did as he said, drawing slow breaths. I sought the inner presence that had been with me since my first shift, a silver-furred, watchful creature that had been as confused and frightened as I was all these years. It stirred now, curious, alert. "Good. Now reach past her. Reach for the feeling you had when the vision came, the stretching, the knowing. Don't chase it, just invite it." I focused on the memory, the sudden pain, the dizzying shift, the impossible clarity of the cave. I didn't try to force it. I just held the memory open like an unspoken question. At first, there was only darkness behind my eyelids, then pinpricks of light. Not the warm gold of the sunbeam, but cold silver specks, stars. They multiplied, swirling into patterns that were almost constellations, but not quite, a sky seen from another world through another's eyes. "I see stars, a strange sky." "Follow them," his voice echoed, distant now. The star path beckoned. I felt myself drifting, unmoored from my body, floating along this river of cold light. The darkness around the stars thinned, becoming translucent. Images flickered beneath me like reflections on water. I saw the castle, but not as stone and mortar. I saw it as a pulsing knot of golden energy, threads of power weaving through it, thousands of them, the lives within. One thread, bright and fiercer than all others, sat next to me, its light a steady, comforting burn. Kaelen. From this castle heart, threads of gold stretched out into the land, connecting to other bright nodes, the territories. But one thread, thin and sickly, a poisonous greenish-black, snaked away from the castle, coiling deep into the western forest. I willed myself to follow it. The forest blurred beneath me, a tapestry of green life force. The black thread led to a knot of concentrated darkness, a blot against the vibrant land, a cave. As I focused, the vision snapped into sharp, painful clarity. Celine held the moon shadow blade. It glowed with that same cold blue-white light, humming with a sound that vibrated in my teeth. Leora was sprinkling a circle of black salt around the perimeter of their bloody symbols. "The binding is almost complete," Celine said, her voice tight with excitement. "Once the moon reaches its peak tomorrow, the blade will be attuned. It won't just cut their bond, it will leech the potential from her, from the very air between them. He will look at her and feel nothing, a void where a mate should be. "And the distraction?" Leora asked, her eyes gleaming in the blade's eerie light. A cruel smile touched Celine's lips. "The village, the western granary. A fire there will draw every guard from the ceremonial grounds. While they scramble to save commoners from burning, we walk unseen into the circle." The vision wavered, the strain of holding it making my spiritual self feel thin, stretched too far. I fought to stay, to see more. Where? When? As if sensing my question, Celine's gaze dropped to a piece of parchment beside her, a map. Her finger tapped a specific location, the western watchtower, not to attack it, but to use its height, to watch, to time their move. The connection shattered. I gasped, crumpling forward. Strong arms caught me, pulling me back from the edge of the sunbeam. I was in my body again, heavy and aching, my head pumping as if I'd been struck. "Breathe, Elara, just breathe." Kaelen's voice was close, his hand rubbing slow circles on my back. "You're here, you're safe." It took a moment to find my voice, to separate the vision from the reality of cold stone and warm hands. "The western watchtower," I choked out. "They're using it as a vantage. And the village, the western granary. At sunset, before the ceremony, they're going to set a fire, a distraction." His body went rigid beside me, the comforting hand on my back stilled. When he spoke, his voice was the calm before the storm. "Are you certain?" "I saw the map. I heard them plan it." He helped me to my feet, his support unwavering even as his mind was already racing ahead. "Then we prepare for both." He called out, and within moments Gareth appeared at the door. "Send for Alpha Victor and Elena, now." While we waited, he guided me to a stone bench at the edge of the chamber. "Your first true vision," he said, watching me with an unreadable expression. "It is a gift, Elara. A heavy one, but a gift. You may have just saved countless lives." "It feels like a violation," I confessed, wrapping my arms around me. "Seeing what I shouldn't know, knowing what I don't want to know." "Knowing is power," he said quietly, "and you are stronger than you think." His thumbs brushed the line of my collarbones, a whisper of contact. "Rest. Tomorrow we face the moon." He left me then, and I entered the silent, opulent room, but his words echoed. "I trust you." No one had ever said that to me before. I wasn't sure I believed it, but the wanting to believe was a small, warm flame in the cold silence. A deafening, ringing silence that swallowed the world. Then chaos erupted. Shouts, snarls, the scuffle of struggle. The beautiful helix of gold and silver light had vanished, snapped back into Kaelen and me like severed puppet strings. I lay on the cold, hard earth, my chest aching where the shockwave had struck me, staring up at the indifferent moon. "Elara!" Kaelen's voice cut through the noise. He was beside me in an instant, his hands on my shoulders, his face a mask of fear that looked utterly foreign on him. "Are you hurt? Speak to me." I tried to draw breath, to tell him I was whole, but my lungs refused. I could only manage a weak shake of my head, my eyes darting past him to the center of the commotion. Guards had Agnes pinned to the ground. The moon shadow blade lay a few feet away, its eerie blue-white glow now dull, inert, like a dead eye. Her hood was thrown back, revealing a face etched with years and wisdom I had trusted. Her eyes, usually so kind, were wide with a frantic, determined energy that was now dissolving into despair. "Agnes!" The name was a ragged whisper torn from my bruised throat. Of all the betrayals, this one cut the deepest. She had been my only solace, the bearer of the one truth that kept me sane. Kaelen followed my gaze, his own expression hardening into something lethal. He stood, pulling me up with him, keeping one arm firmly around me as I swayed. "Secure the blade, with iron and wolfsbane," he commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority over the panicked crowd. "Bring the traitor to the receiving hall, Now. Everyone else return to the castle. The ceremony is suspended." "Suspended?" Victor Grimshaw's voice boomed. "The bond was forming. The moon witnessed it." "And was nearly murdered by treachery," Kaelen snarled, the alpha power in his voice making even Victor flinch. "The moon will have her due, but first we will have answers." He didn't wait for agreement. Supporting my weight, he led me from the stone circle, through the murmuring, shocked crowd. I felt their eyes on me. Pity, curiosity, blame. The queen who couldn't even complete her own bonding. The walk back to the castle was a blur of torchlight and whispering shadows. My mind reeled. Agnes? Why? The question was a drumbeat in my aching skull. We didn't go to the Grand Council chamber. Kaelen took me to a smaller, more austere room, the King's Justice Hall. It was a place for truth-seeking, not politics. Stone walls, a high chair for the king, and a cold, empty space in the center of the floor for the accused. A single brazier of coals cast flickering, demonic shadows. He sat me in a chair to the side of his own, his hand lingering on my shoulder for a moment longer than necessary. "Your sight," he said quietly. "In the end, you moved not on what you saw, but on what you knew. You saved the bond." "I saw more," I whispered, the words painful. "The blade, it wasn't just to cut. It was linked, a siphon. The ritual wasn't complete. It's connected to someone else, somewhere in the castle, waiting to take the power." His eyes narrowed to amber slits. A siphon, to steal the energy of a royal mate bond. That is power beyond mere jealousy. That is ambition of a different scale. He looked toward the door, his jaw tight. "We will untangle this web, starting with its weakest thread." The doors opened. 2 guards hauled Agnes in. They had bound her hands with cold iron cuffs, the metal already causing angry red welts on her skin, suppressing any magic she might wield. They forced her to her knees in the center of the room. The kind, wrinkled face I remembered was gone. In its place was a defiant, weary mask. But her eyes, when they met mine, held a terrible, aching sorrow. "Agnes," I said before Kaelen could speak. My voice was stronger now, fueled by a hurt that outweighed the physical pain. "Why?" She shook her head, a tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. "Oh, child, my poor, sweet ghost." "Do not call her that." Kaelen's voice was a whip-crack in the quiet room. "You forfeited any right to affection when you raised a cursed blade against your future queen. You will answer. Who do you serve? My sisters paid you? Promised you what? Gold? Status?" Agnes let out a bitter, choked laugh. "Your sisters? Those pretty, poisonous flowers? They are children playing with fire they don't understand. They wanted to hide her, to break her. Their magic is petty, small." The implication hung in the air, cold and heavy. "Then whose magic is this?" Kaelen leaned forward, his presence filling the room. "Who crafted the siphon? Who waits in the shadows of my home to steal a king's destiny?" Agnes closed her eyes, a tremor running through her. "I cannot say." "You will say." It was not a threat, but a simple, terrifying statement of fact. "You can burn me, Your Majesty," she whispered, opening her eyes to look at me again, her gaze pleading. "You can break me, but some vows are etched in the soul with deeper magic than you command. I am bound." A soul vow, the most unbreakable oath a werewolf could make, sworn on their wolf spirit. To break it was to sever one's own soul. "Then you will die for them," Kaelen said, his tone flat. "Wait!" The word left my lips before I could think. Both Kaelen and Agnes stared at me. "You told me the truth," I said to her, standing on unsteady legs. Kaelen's hand shot out to steady me, but I shrugged it off gently. When I was fevered, you whispered that the curse was in my mind. You gave me the first piece of myself back. Why do that if you served the one who wanted me destroyed?" Agnes's face crumpled. "Because I served your mother, Elara, not her enemies." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My mother? "Lynette Frostweaver was my dearest friend," Agnes said, the words pouring out now, a confession held too long. "She was different, like you. She saw things, felt things in the moon's currents that others were blind to. She knew her pregnancy was dangerous. She knew she might not survive your birth." The healer's voice broke. "She made me swear a soul vow to watch over you, to protect you from the darkness she sensed gathering around our house." "Protect me?" I gestured wildly at the memory of the blade. "You just tried to kill me." "No!" The denial was fierce. "I was trying to save you. Don't you see? The siphon, it wasn't to steal the bond's power for some shadowy master. It was to redirect it." Kaelen went very still. "Redirect it? Where?" Agnes looked at him, her defiance gone, replaced with utter exhaustion. "Into a vessel they could not access, into the earth itself, into the oldest stones of this mountain, anywhere but in their hands. Celine and Leora's ritual was a key, but they were turning it in the wrong lock. I was trying to break the key in the turning." The pieces began to tumble into a horrifying new picture. "They don't know," I breathed. "My sisters, they think they're working their own vengeance, but they're being used. Someone else gave them the ritual. Someone else wants the bond's power. And you were trying to foil that someone." Agnes nodded, a sob escaping her. "The moment you were chosen, I knew their agent would make a move. I had to get close. I had to be the one to wield the blade, to control the outcome. I couldn't tell you. The vow, it bound my tongue until the trap was sprung." "Who is it, Agnes?" Kaelen's voice was deadly soft. "Who do you truly serve in this?" "I served the memory of Lynette," she cried, "and I serve the true future of our people, the one her daughter represents, the one he fears." "He?" But Agnes clamped her mouth shut, shaking her head violently. The soul vow had its limits, and she had reached them. She would not, could not, speak the name. Kaelen stared at her for a long, tense minute. Then he sat back in his throne. "You will be confined, not in a dungeon, but under constant guard in the healer's quarters. You will have no visitors. You will touch no magic." He looked at me. "Her fate is yours to decide, Elara. She acted against us, but her intent complicates the crime." Mercy? He was offering me mercy for my would-be killer, because she had been my mother's friend, because she had, in her twisted way, tried to protect me. The weight of the decision was immense. "Keep her safe," I said finally, my eyes on Agnes's grateful, tear-streaked face, "and keep her silent until we find the one she's too afraid to name." As the guards led her away, a new kind of exhaustion settled over me. The enemies were no longer just my sisters, they were phantoms. The sunrise felt like a lie. It painted the world in soft gold and rose, a beautiful veil over the ugliness festering beneath the castle stones. I stood at my window, the memory of the cold cavern, the dying green light, and Gareth's final, sickening crack clinging to me like a chill. Kaelen had left me at my door with a quiet, "Rest, I will deal with what comes next." His eyes had held a storm of things he wouldn't say, guilt, fury, a protectiveness that felt like a cage. I didn't rest. I washed the dust of the secret passages from my skin, changed into a simple gray dress, and waited. The bond between us was a faint, bruised thing now, a silver thread wrapped in thorns. I could feel his turmoil through it, a low, constant hum of anger and grim purpose. The summons came mid-morning, not from a servant, but from Alpha Elena herself. Her silver gaze swept over me as she stood in my doorway. "The council convenes. Your presence is required." No title, no courtesy. The failed ceremony and the night's chaos had stripped me of any nascent respect. "The king," I began. "Has called the council," she interrupted. "He will be there, as will the representatives from House Frostweaver." A pause, her eyes sharp as daggers. "Your sisters have demanded the right to speak in their own defense. Given the complexities of last night, their request has been granted." My heart sank. Celine and Leora given a platform. It was a nightmare. The council chamber felt different. The morning light streaming through the high windows was too bright, too revealing. The air was thick with tension and the scent of mistrust. All 12 territorial alphas were present, their expressions ranging from grim to openly hostile. Victor Grimshaw looked like he'd swallowed a live coal. At the far end of the table, Celine and Leora sat, flanked by 4 stern guards. They were pale, their fine clothes rumbled, but their eyes burned with a feverish, defiant light. They saw me, and their lips curled in identical, venomous smiles. Kaelen sat at the head of the table, a king carved from ice. The knuckles of one hand were bandaged, a stark white against the dark wood. He didn't look at me as I took the chair beside him, the chair that suddenly felt like an executioner's block. "We are gathered," Kaelen began, his voice devoid of all warmth, "because treachery has struck at the heart of the crown, and the sacred mate bond has been attacked. Last night, the king's own steward, Gareth, was revealed as a conspirator. He is dead, but his confession, drawn in his final moments, implicates others. He didn't mention my part. He didn't mention the siphon or my sight. He was building a wall around me with his silence, and I wasn't sure if it was to protect me or to control the narrative." "A dead man's words are easily shaped," Celine said, her voice clear and cutting. She stood, the picture of wronged nobility. "We have been falsely accused, imprisoned, our honor dragged in filth. And for what? Because our fragile sister, in her ambition to be queen, spins tales of curses and blades." Leora stood beside her, a tear trembling on her cheek. It was a masterful performance. "We loved her, we protected her, and she repays us by poisoning the king's mind against us? Last night's fiasco is proof of her instability. The bond failed. The moon rejected her." A murmur of agreement rippled through some of the alphas. The bond had failed, publicly. That fact was a weapon in their hands. "The bond was attacked by a magical siphon," stated Kaelen, his tone brooking no argument. "A device keyed to the ceremony by blood magic you two performed. Gareth facilitated, but you laid the foundation." "We admit to the first curse," Celine declared, throwing her hands wide in a show of dramatic confession. "A childish, regrettable mistake, born of jealousy, yes. We have confessed this. We broke it when commanded. But this siphon? This plot with the steward? This is the fantasy of a girl who sees monsters in shadows and treachery in every corner." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "She has the sight, a seer's trickery. She plants visions in her own mind and calls them truth." The accusation hung in the air, poisonously plausible. A seer was rare, mysterious. Who could say what was true vision and what was manipulation? Elena spoke, her voice cool. "The steward is dead by the king's own hand. His guilt seems evident. The connection to the Frostweaver sisters, however, relies on the king's claim of their magical signature on this siphon. Where is this device? Let the council examine it." Kaelen's jaw tightened. "It was destroyed in the confrontation." "Convenient," muttered an alpha from the southern marshes. "And the healer," rumbled Victor Grimshaw, "the one caught with the blade, what does she say?" "Agnes is bound by a soul vow," I said, speaking for the first time. My voice sounded small in the vast room. "She cannot name her master, but she served my mother. She acted to protect me from a plot she knew was larger than my sister's jealousy." Leora laughed, a brittle, ugly sound. "A soul vow? To a dead woman? And she shows her loyalty by trying to murder you at your bonding? Your stories unravel, sister. You cling to any narrative that paints you as the victim, never the schemer." I felt the council's eyes on me, their doubt a physical pressure. I was losing them. Kaelen's silent, stern support wasn't enough. He was the king who had chosen me, his judgment now in question. I was the outsider with a freakish gift, accusing my own blood with no solid proof but my own visions. I had to do something. I had to show them, not tell them. I closed my eyes, blocking out Celine's smug face, Leora's false tears, the council's suspicion. I reached for that bruised, thorny bond with Kaelen. It was a faint one, but it was there, and it was a two-way street. I pushed my memory down that thread, not of the cavern, but of the ceremony, the moment the bond formed, the beautiful, undeniable truth of it, the intertwining gold and silver that everyone had seen. I felt Kaelen start beside me. He hadn't expected this. I was exposing a private truth, making our wounded connection public. But I didn't stop. I pushed the feeling further, the shock of the blade's approach, the wrenching pull of the siphon, the cold, greedy drain. And then I showed them the other thread, the one I'd seen in my vision in the cavern, the black thread from the siphon, not to my sisters, but winding away, deeper, to a purpose Gareth had named, the purity of the bloodlines. It was just an impression, a feeling, a flash of Gareth's fanatical eyes. I couldn't prove it, but I could make them feel it. I opened my eyes. I was breathing heavily, sweat beading on my temples. The room was utterly silent. The alphas were staring at me, but their expressions had changed. Confusion, unease, a dawning, uncomfortable realization. They hadn't heard words, they had felt an echo, a whisper of truth transmitted through the mate bond to their own alpha senses. It was abstract, but for wolves who lived by instinct and emotion, it was more compelling than any evidence. Celine and Leora felt the shift. Their confidence wavered. "What parlor trick is this?" Celine snapped, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Kaelen looked at me, his amber eyes wide with shock, then with a fierce, blazing pride. He stood. "That was no trick," he said, his voice resonating with power. "That was the truth of the bond, scarred but alive. That was the violation we suffered, and that was the shadow of the true enemy, one who views the moon's will as a weakness to be corrected." He turned his gaze on my sisters. "You are pawns, vile, jealous pawns. Your magic was the tool, but the hand that guided it belongs to another. You will answer for your crimes, the curse, the attempted use of the moon shadow blade, but your punishment will consider your manipulation by a higher, hidden power." He looked around the table. "The threat is not over. Gareth was a finger of a hand we cannot yet see. We have weathered an attack on the royal bond itself. This council must now decide. Do we stand divided, questioning the moon's chosen because the path is rocky, or do we unite against a shadow that seeks to control the throne by stealing its very heart?" The silence stretched. Victor Grimshaw was the first to break it. He grunted, a sound like grinding stones. "I felt it," he admitted grudgingly, "through the bond echo, a violation, a cold purpose." He looked at Celine and Leora with utter contempt. These two reek of petty. The smell clung to my memory, a phantom stench in my nose that no amount of scrubbing could erase. Wet stone and rotten lilies. The vision in the kitchen had been a violation more intimate than any blade. It had seen me, and that single hissed word, seer, echoed in the silent spaces of my mind, a chill that never fully dissipated. I told no one, not Cook, not the guards, not Elena. I carried the secret like a shard of ice in my chest. What words could explain the feeling of a gaze crossing time? How could I describe the malevolent intelligence in that faceless attention? They would think the stress had finally shattered me. The fragile credibility I'd won in the council would vanish. But the secret burned. It made my training with Elena feel like a child playing at war while a real army gathered in the fog. Her lessons on mental walls and focused perception were suddenly, vitally urgent. I applied myself with a desperate intensity that made her raise a silver brow. "You have found motivation," she observed one afternoon as I successfully identified, with my eyes blindfolded, the specific type of feather, goshawk, primary, from the left wing, she held in her hand. It was the first exercise I'd mastered perfectly. "Fear is a powerful teacher," I replied, my voice taut. She studied me, her gaze missing nothing. "The fear of a hidden enemy in court is one thing. This feels sharper. What have you seen, Elara?" I wavered. The need to share the burden warred with the terror of being dismissed. "I saw something in the eastern woods. It wasn't a wolf. It knew I was looking." Elena went very still. "Describe it." "A blur, tattered gray. The forest was dead around it, and the smell, wet stone, rotten lilies." A muscle in her jaw jumped. The reaction was subtle, but for the unflappable silver alpha, it was a quake. "The Blight wood," she whispered. "You know it?" "A legend, a sickness of the land from the time before the Great Division. It was said to be purged, the corrupted creatures driven into the deepest, unmapped reaches." She paced, her movements restless. "If it stirs again, and if it is aware of you," she stopped, pinning me with her stare. "You must tell the king." The thought of telling Kaelen filled me with a strange dread. He was already a fortress under siege, shoring up defenses against political betrayal. To bring him this eldritch threat felt like prying open a new crack in his walls. But Elena was right. I found him in the war room, a cavernous hall dominated by a massive table carved with a relief map of the 5 territories. He stood over the eastern reaches, his fingers tracing the line of the Black River. He looked up as I entered, and for a fleeting moment before the king's mask settled back into place, I saw the profound weariness in his eyes. "Elara, Elena said it was urgent." I stood before the great table, feeling small. "Something is in the eastern woods, near the Black River." I told him everything, leaving nothing out. The guard's conversation, the involuntary vision, the sentient gaze, the smell. As I spoke, his expression darkened from curiosity to grim concentration. When he finished, he was silent for a minute long, staring at the map as if it might reveal new secrets. "The Blight wood," he finally said, confirming Elena's fear. "My grandfather spoke of it, not as a legend, as a contained threat. A pact was made," he said, "to keep it sleeping." He looked at me. "If it wakes, and if it has an agent who can sense a seer's gaze, then Gareth's fanaticism about purity takes on a new, darker meaning." A cold realization dawned. "You think the enemy within and this enemy without are connected?" "A sickness of the land and a sickness of the mind often share a root," he said, his voice low. "Gareth spoke of purity, of correcting the moon's whim. What if that corruption, the blight, whispers such thoughts, offers power in exchange for service? It would want the bonded Alpha King and Queen destroyed. A bonded Alpha King and Queen, their power united and blessed by the moon, would be a beacon of strength, a threat to something that feeds on discord and decay. The scope of it was staggering. It wasn't just a rival alpha or a disgruntled noble. We were facing something that poisoned the very land and the minds of men. What do we do? My voice was small in the vast room. We prepare, he said, his decisiveness a bulwark against the rising tide of fear. The winter gathering is in 3 weeks. Every alpha, every warrior, every elder will be here. It is a risk we concentrate our strength, but also our vulnerabilities. It is also our greatest opportunity. We must unveil this threat there, unite the packs against it before it spreads. He came around the table, stopping before me. And you, Elara, must be ready. Your sight is no longer just a tool for finding traitors. It may be our only early warning against an enemy that moves in shadows we cannot perceive. Elena will intensify your training. You will learn not just to shield your mind, but to cast your sight like a net, to sense corruption, and you will learn to fight. Fight? The idea was absurd. I could barely hold a dagger correctly. Not with blades, he said, with your will. If this blight creature can sense you, you must be able to strike back along that same connection. To shield is defensive. We must also have a weapon. The next phase of my training became a quiet, desperate race against a hidden clock. My days were split into 3. Mornings were still with Elena, but now we focused on offensive mental exercises. She taught me to focus my will into a sharp point, to imagine it as a blade of pure moonlight. We practiced on inanimate targets. She would hold a corrupted piece of wood, infected with a harmless fungus, and I would try to sense the corruption and push my will against it, not to destroy the wood, but to repel the infection. It was grueling, abstract work, with little sign of success. Afternoons, Kaelen himself took over. He led me to the royal archives, a labyrinth of scrolls and codices that smelled of dust and forgotten knowledge. We weren't studying politics or genealogy. We were hunting for any fragment of text about the Blightwood, the Great Division, the ancient pacts. To fight an enemy, he said, you must know its nature. His fingers careful on brittle parchment. We found snippets. Mentions of stone-sick forests, of creatures called gray watchers that moved without sound, of a corruption that twisted not just flesh, but desire, amplifying ambition into madness, jealousy into murderous rage. It painted a terrifying picture, one that made my sister's actions seem like a pale reflection of a deeper poison. Had the Blight's influence been whispering to them for years, feeding their petty hatred until it blossomed into blood magic? Even evenings my own were peaceless. The bond between Kaelen and me, though carefully tended in our work, remained quiet and thorny. We were allies in a secret war, not a couple approaching a bonding. The impending winter gathering loomed a mountain we had to climb while carrying this new terrible burden. One evening, about a week after the vision, I was in the castle's small, neglected conservatory. It was the one place that reminded me of my mother's garden, filled with subdued winter blooms and the quiet drip of a small fountain. I was practicing Elena's shielding techniques, trying to build my mental wall brick by brick, when a scent cut through the damp earth and floral perfume. Wet stone, rotten lilies, faint, distant, but here, inside the castle, my heart seized. I dropped the shield, my senses flaring out wildly, a panicked animal seeking the predator. The vision came unbidden, a brutal yank into that dark, dead forest. But this time, I wasn't just an observer. The gray watcher stood at the edge of the blackened trees, its form coalescing from tattered shadows. It pointed a long, bony finger, not at the distant village, but at a new image that formed between us, a reflection of the castle's conservatory, of me standing frozen by the fountain. Its attention was a physical weight, crushing. "Seer," the voice hissed again, pleased now. You shine so brightly in the dark, a beacon. We are coming." Then it showed me something else, not the eastern woods, a location within the castle grounds, the old ice house, a half-buried structure dug into the northern cliff, used for storage long ago and now mostly forgotten. The vision zoomed into its dank interior, where the stone walls wept with perpetual chill. There, tucked behind a fallen shelf of rotten wood, was a small clay jar, unadorned, sealed with wax. I broke the connection. I stumbled back against a potted fern, gasping. The scent was gone. The vision had been a message, a taunt, and a delivery. It had left something here, weeks, maybe months ago. Through Gareth? Through some other unwitting agent? A seed of the Blight planted in the heart of our strength. I didn't run to Kaelen. I didn't call for guards. The creature had shown me this for a reason. It wanted me to find it, perhaps to touch it, to open it, to complete some corruption. This was a test of my control. The sealed jar was gone, buried in sacred ground miles from any living soul. But its echo remained, a phantom chill in the castle's bones. Kaelen's orders turned the estate into a fortress of both stone and spirit. Wards, invisible to the eye but humming against my newly sensitive senses, were etched into doorways and flagstones. The air tasted of vigilance and wolfsbane. My own transformation was less visible but more profound. Elena's training shifted from theory to grim practicality. The blade of moonlight exercise was no longer an abstraction. She brought me to a remote, walled courtyard where a sickly, blighted sapling, uprooted from the eastern forests, was kept in an iron pot. Its leaves were a mottled gray-green, and a faint, unpleasant odor of decay clung to it. "This is a child of the corruption," Elena said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Its presence is weak, contained. You will not destroy it today. You will learn to push against it, to make your will a wall it cannot cross." She stood me 10 paces from the pot. "Shield first, then, when you are centered, project. Imagine your will as light, not a blade, but a tide, a cleansing wave." I closed my eyes, building my mental fortress brick by brick. Behind the walls, I gathered the feeling of the bond, not its current thorns, but the memory of its pure, silvery light. I thought of my mother's garden, of life stubbornly pushing through frozen earth. I filled myself with the opposite of the Blight's stagnant decay. I opened my eyes and pushed. Nothing happened. The sapling sat in its pot, a pathetic monument to sickness. "You are pushing from your mind," Elena observed. "Push from your spirit, from the core of what you are. You are a daughter of the moon, a promised queen, a survivor. That is your power, not a trick of perception." I tried again. This time, I didn't think of technique. I thought of Celine's sneer, of the scars I'd believed were real, of the cold gaze in the dead forest. I thought of the jar, a piece of that evil planted in my new home. Anger, clean and sharp, rose in me. Not the Blight's corrosive rage, but a protective fury. I didn't visualize a wave. I simply rejected. A shimmer passed through the air between me and the sapling. The mottled leaves trembled. For a single second, the faint smell of rot was overpowered by the crisp, clean scent of frost and night-blooming jasmine. My scent. Then it was gone. I sagged, a headache blossoming behind my eyes, but Elena was nodding, a rare glint of approval in her silver eyes. "Better. A flicker. Remember that feeling. The rejection of corruption is not an act of violence. It is an affirmation of what is true and whole." Progress was measured in flickers. Meanwhile, life in the castle moved forward with the grim momentum of a glacier. Preparations for the winter gathering consumed everyone. Tapestries were aired, stores counted, guest quarters scrubbed. The atmosphere was one of tense celebration, a feast prepared on the edge of a cliff. My role in this was a constant low-grade torment. I was to be hostess, a figure of grace and unity. Kaelen arranged for me to have lessons, not from Elena, but from an elderly, formidable she-wolf named Isolde, who had served his grandmother. lessons on protocol, on the complex web of pack alliances and grudges, on how to wear a crown without letting it crush your neck. You are not just his mate, Isolde rasped, her back straight as a spear, though she needed a cane to walk. You are a symbol. The packs will look to you to see if this bond is strength or sentiment. You must be poised. You must be gracious. You must be unshakable. Her sharp eyes took in my calloused hands, the tired shadows under my eyes from my training with Elena, and you must look the part. Thus began another education, in silks and jewels, in walking with a measured pace, in speaking in the low, carrying register of command. It felt like wearing a skin that didn't fit. The weight of the gowns was oppressive. The interested, assessing stares of the visiting nobles as they began to trickle in made my palms sweat. I was playing a part, and everyone knew it. The only respite was the conservatory. Late at night, when the castle slept, I would slip away there. It was there, 2 nights before the official start of the gathering, that Kaelen found me. I was not practicing my will or my poise. I was simply sitting on a stone bench, my fingers tracing the velvety petal of a midnight orchid, trying to remember what quiet felt like. He entered silently, a shadow among the deeper shadows of the plants. He wore no crown, just simple dark clothes. He looked more like the warrior I'd first glimpsed than the burdened king. Isolde says you are progressing, he said, his voice a soft rumble in the quiet. Isolde says I hold a teacup like I'm expecting it to bite me, I replied without looking up. A faint, real smile touched his lips. She said that to me about my first sword grip. He came to sit beside me, not too close, but his presence was a tangible warmth in the cool air. The alphas of the eastern ridge and the southern marshes arrived today with their retinues. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Do they know? About the Blight? No, and we cannot tell them, not yet. Panic is a weapon our enemy would relish. The gathering must appear normal, a show of unity and strength. That is the first blow we strike against the shadow, by proving we are not divided. He was right, but the deception felt like another layer of isolation. And us, I asked, the question slipping out. The bond. Isolde says the cold moon bonding ritual is intricate. It requires a harmony we don't have. He was quiet for a long moment. The bond is there, Elara. It is not what it was at the stone circle. It is quieter, deeper perhaps, like roots. They don't shine, but they hold the tree fast against the storm. He turned to look at me, his amber eyes capturing the faint moonlight filtering through the glass ceiling. We do not need a brilliant display. We need truth, our truth, the truth of 2 people who have faced betrayal and terror and chosen to stand together anyway. The moon will honor that. His words were a balm. For a moment, the weight of crowns and expectations lifted. It was just us in a room of growing things, acknowledging the simple, terrifying fact of our alliance. I am afraid, I confessed, the admission stark in the fragrant dark. Not just of the Blight or the gathering. I'm afraid of becoming someone I don't know. This queen they want me to be, she feels like a stranger. Then don't become her, simply. Become yourself. The girl who tended a forgotten garden, the woman who faced a cursed blade to protect a fragile connection, the seer who looked into darkness and did not flinch. Let that be your crown. The packs will respect strength, Elara, even if it doesn't come in the package they expect. He stood, offering me his hand. Come, the moon is bright. There is something I want to show you. Puzzled, I took his hand. He didn't lead me to the grand halls or the battlements. He led me down, through servants' passages, to a heavy door that opened onto the mountainside itself. The cold night air was a slap, clean and sharp. Before us, a narrow path wound along the cliff face, protected by a sheer rock wall on one side and a dizzying drop on the other. Where are we going? To see your kingdom, he said, and started down the path. My heart hammered, but I followed. The path ended at a small natural ledge, hidden from the castle above and the lands below. The view was breathtaking. The 5 territories spread out under the brilliant cold moon, silvered and silent. rivers like mercury, forests like ruffled velvet, the distant lights of villages like fallen stars. "This was my mother's place," Kaelen said quietly, his voice barely above the sigh of the wind. "When the weight of the crown grew too heavy, she would come here. She said it reminded her that a kingdom is not just walls and treaties, it is land and people and the quiet magic of a moonlit night. It is worth protecting." I looked out, the vastness stealing my breath. This was what he ruled, what we were meant to rule together. The fear didn't vanish, but it shifted. It wasn't just about me anymore. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "It is," he agreed. Then he pointed east toward a dark smudge on the horizon where the forest seemed to swallow the moonlight. "And that is the edge of the Blightwood. It is part of the kingdom too, a sickness within it. We cannot look away from the beauty or the darkness. A queen must see both." We stood in silence for a long time, the cold seeping through our clothes, the bond between us a quiet, steady hum in the vastness. It felt, for the first time, not like a chain or a wound, but like a tether, a lifeline connecting two people on a lonely ledge. When we returned, the castle felt different, less like a cage, more like a ship preparing for a storm. I carried the memory of that view with me, a secret strength. The next day, the gathering began in earnest. The great hall overflowed with wolves from every territory. The noise was a physical force. Laughter, shouted greetings, the clatter of plates, the undercurrent of 100 private conversations and negotiations. I stood beside Kaelen on the dais, wearing a deep blue velvet gown and a slender silver circlet, playing my part. I greeted Alpha Victor, who grunted what passed for a pleasantry. I met the sly, calculating Alpha of the southern marshes, Roderick Vane, whose eyes lingered. The phantom scent of decay lingered in my nose long after the corridor stood empty. The whispered threat echoed in the vaults of my mind. "We will water them." The Blight wasn't just a monster in the woods, it was a poisoner of thoughts, a cultivator of the worst in us, and it had just walked the halls of my new home. Sleep was impossible. I paced my chambers, the proud words I'd spoken to Alpha Roderick, "Winter reveals the strength of the roots," now tasting like ash. What if the roots here were all shallow? What if the unity I'd toasted was a brittle facade, ready to crack under the first frost of fear? At first light, I went not to Elena, but to the castle's small chapel. It was a simple, ancient room dedicated to the moon, with a circular window of clear quartz that caught the dawn and scattered it into rainbows on the stone floor. I wasn't praying, I was seeking silence, but the silence was gone. The chapel was empty, yet the air felt crowded, thick with the residue of 100 whispered anxieties, secret ambitions, and private jealousies left behind by the gathering's guests. It was like the psychic echo of the feast, a fog of negative emotion. My sight, still raw and untamed, brushed against it. I didn't see visions, but I felt them. A flash of Alpha Roderick's bitter resentment toward Kaelen's younger, stronger rule. A pang of Victor's gnawing worry over his Pact's eastern borders, so close to the blighted woods. The sharp green sting of envy from a southern daughter whose beauty had been overlooked. And beneath it all, a new, sickly sweet thread, faint but unmistakable, the Blight's influence, twisting these natural emotions, amplifying them, urging them toward malice. It was here, watering the roots. I fled the chapel, my heart a frantic bird in my chest. I found Kaelen in the strategy room, already surrounded by maps and reports. He took one look at my face and dismissed the scouts with a wave. "It's inside the castle," I said, my voice unsteady. "Not a creature, the influence, the feeling of it. In the chapel, it's feeding on them, on their fear and anger." He didn't question me. His expression turned to granite. "The gatherings have always been cauldrons of tension. It provides perfect cover." He slammed a fist on the table, making the maps jump. "We must act, but without causing the panic we seek to avoid." "I can find it," I heard myself say. The idea was terrifying, to deliberately seek out that corrupting presence. Not the source, but the pockets where it's thickest, where it's taking root. He studied me, conflict warring in his eyes. It's a risk, if it can sense you. I already knows me, I said, the memory of the hissed seer chilling my blood. I can't hide from it, but maybe I can track it, find who it's whispering to the loudest. After a long moment, he gave a sharp nod. Elena will go with you. You will not be alone for a moment. Elena, when told, merely tightened the straps on her leather bracers. A hunt of a different kind, she said, her silver eyes glinting. We move quietly. You will be my hound. I will be your blade. And so began the strangest day of the gathering. While below in the great yards, wolves competed in feats of strength and skill, and in the solar, ladies exchanged polished gossip, Elena and I moved like ghosts through the castle's underbelly. We started in the servants' quarters, the kitchens, the guard rooms. I closed my eyes, lowering the shields Elena had taught me to build, opening myself just a crack to the emotional currents of the place. Most were normal, the warm fatigue of cooks, the focused tension of guards, the cheerful exhaustion of maids. But here and there I felt a cold, oily spot, a stable boy nursing a furious grudge over a perceived slight, his anger sharpened to a murderous edge, a junior guard fantasizing with unnatural vividness about stealing from the royal treasury. The emotions were human, but they were fed, fattened by something external. We didn't confront them. Elena made discreet notes. These were symptoms, not the cause. As the day wore on, we moved up to the guest wings. This was more dangerous. Here, the emotions were more potent, the minds more complex. In the wing housing the alpha of the Southern Marsh Pack, the air was thick with ambition and a peculiar, creeping dissatisfaction. Outside Alpha Roderick's own door, I had to clutch the wall. The wave of his resentment and cunning was so strong, tinged with that sickly sweet decay. He is ripe for it, Elena murmured, her voice cold. But he is not a fool. The Blight may encourage his native treachery, but it does not control him yet. The worst was the North Wing, where my own pack and other northern allies stayed. Here, amidst the familiar sense of pine and cold air, the corruption was more subtle, more insidious. It wasn't stoking ambition, it was feeding on guilt, on fractured loyalty, on the confusion left in the wake of my sister's fall. I felt the conflicted anguish of my father's beta, torn between his alpha's shame and his own doubt about me. I felt the sharp schadenfreude of a minor northern lord who had always envied House Frostweaver. And beneath it all, a new, sickly sweet thread, faint but unmistakable, the Blight's influence, twisting these natural emotions, amplifying them, urging them toward malice. It was here, watering the roots. I fled the chapel, my heart a frantic bird in my chest. I found Kaelen in the strategy room, already surrounded by maps and reports. He took one look at my face and dismissed the scouts with a wave. It's inside the castle, I said, my voice unsteady. Not a creature, the influence, the feeling of it. In the chapel, it's feeding on them, on their fear and anger. He didn't question me. His expression turned to granite. The gatherings have always been cauldrons of tension. It provides perfect cover. He slammed a fist on the table, making the maps jump. We must act, but without causing the panic we seek to avoid. I can find it, I heard myself say. The idea was terrifying, to deliberately seek out that corrupting presence. Not the source, but the pockets where it's thickest, where it's taking root. He studied me, conflict warring in his eyes. It's a risk, if it can sense you. I already knows me, I said, the memory of the hissed seer chilling my blood. I can't hide from it, but maybe I can track it, find who it's whispering to the loudest. After a long moment, he gave a sharp nod. Elena will go with you. You will not be alone for a moment. Elena, when told, merely tightened the straps on her leather bracers. A hunt of a different kind, she said, her silver eyes glinting. We move quietly. You will be my hound. I will be your blade. And so began the strangest day of the gathering, while below in the great yards, wolves competed in feats of strength and skill, and in the solar, ladies exchanged polished gossip. Elena and I moved like ghosts through the castle's underbelly. We started in the servants' quarters, the kitchens, the guard rooms. I closed my eyes, lowering the shields Elena had taught me to build, opening myself just a crack to the emotional currents of the place. Most were normal, the warm fatigue of cooks, the focused tension of guards, the cheerful exhaustion of maids. But here and there I felt a cold, oily spot, a stable boy nursing a furious grudge over a perceived slight, his anger sharpened to a murderous edge, a junior guard fantasizing with unnatural vividness about stealing from the royal treasury. The emotions were human, but they were fed, fattened by something external. We didn't confront them. Elena made discreet notes. These were symptoms, not the cause. As the day wore on, we moved up to the guest wings. This was more dangerous. Here, the emotions were more potent, the minds more complex. In the wing housing the alpha of the Southern Marsh Pack, the air was thick with ambition and a peculiar, creeping dissatisfaction. Outside Alpha Roderick's own door, I had to clutch the wall. The wave of his resentment and cunning was so strong, tinged with that sickly sweet decay. "He is ripe for it," Elena murmured, her voice cold. "But he is not a fool. The Blight may encourage his native treachery, but it does not control him yet." The worst was the North Wing, where my own pack and other northern allies stayed. Here, amidst the familiar scents of pine and cold air, the corruption was more subtle, more insidious. It wasn't stoking ambition, it was feeding on guilt, on fractured loyalty, on the confusion left in the wake of my sister's fall. I felt the conflicted anguish of my father's beta, torn between his alpha's shame and his own doubt about me. I felt the sharp schadenfreude of a minor northern lord who had always envied House Frostweaver. And beneath it all, a new, sickly sweet thread, faint but unmistakable, the Blight's influence, twisting these natural emotions, amplifying them, urging them toward malice. It was here, watering the roots. I fled the chapel, my heart a frantic bird in my chest. I found Kaelen in the strategy room, already surrounded by maps and reports. He took one look at my face and dismissed the scouts with a wave. "It's inside the castle," I said, my voice unsteady. "Not a creature, the influence, the feeling of it, in the chapel. It's feeding on them, on their fear and anger." He didn't question me. His expression turned to granite. "The gatherings have always been cauldrons of tension. It provides perfect cover.